Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how I made my Maleficent wings. First, I start by tracing out a pattern on brown paper. I estimate a size and hold it up to me to make sure it's the right size. I did this on both sides, but I recommend doing each side on 2 separate pieces of paper. I use craft foam rolls in black to make the wings. I will add a link to them in the description. I think I used about 3 or 4. I began cutting the feather shapes out of craft foam and hot gluing them together. I will add a link to the glue gun I'm using and bulk pack of hot glue in the description. If you want, you can cut the paper pattern apart to trace the foam feathers, then tape the pattern back together. Sometimes I cut a big chunk of feathers instead of individual ones. I use the pattern as a guideline for gluing the foam feather pieces together. I only add glue down the middle of the feathers so I can slice between them. I keep doing this to make the full shape of the wing in layers. I use an X-Acto knife to slice between each feather of the bigger pieces to separate them. This makes them look more like individual feathers but saves time because you don't have to glue them on individually. Then I use my X-Acto knife to make hundreds of little lines on both sides of every feather. This is very easy to do but also very time consuming and repetitive. I promise it's worth it though because it gives extra texture to the feathers to make them look more natural. Every line doesn't have to be perfectly straight. You want it to look as organic as possible anyway. After I'm done using the X-Acto knife, I go over the foam lightly with a heat gun. As you can see, it's sealing the foam and making it look shinier and smoother, as well as making the edges curl up and the lines more defined. If the edges curl up too much, don't worry, you can just hot glue them back down. But be careful not to hold the heat gun in one place for too long because you can burn the foam. Also, make sure you wear a respirator or work outside or a well-ventilated area to not risk breathing in hazardous fumes. After I finish one side, I flip it over and start the other side. I do the exact same thing for each side. I make a pattern, I cut out all the feathers out of foam, I glue them together with hot glue, and use an X-Acto knife to separate the feathers and add all the details. Then I use a heat gun to make the feathers more defined. I don't make the back side of the wing go all the way up to the top because I already have a base for that. Then I glue both sides together. Next, I cut out tons of smaller feathers to fill in the tops of the wings. What you see here is maybe enough for the top of one side, so you will need to cut this many out about 4 times. I cut all these out individually because I want it more detailed near the top of the wings where it will be seen in close-up shots. Then I start gluing on the feather shapes individually. This took me a few hours, but when I was done, I cut lines in every single feather with a knife. And again, I went over it all lightly with a heat gun. As you can see, it's really starting to look like a wing. Next, I use a thick foam floor mat and cut a shape for the top of the wing. I use a lot of hot glue to glue it down to the top of the wing and curve it as it cools down. Hold it until the glue is cool and it should hold its curved shape. I do this for both wings. Next, I go to Home Depot to the electrical aisle and pick up some wire for mounting the wings. I was able to find these big spools of strong copper wire, so I got an employee to help me and he cut it for me. It was much less than $1 per foot. I think I got about 20 or 30 feet of the thickest copper colored wire they had. The great thing about this wire is it's very strong, but it's also pretty easy to bend, so I was able to shape it with my hands. And for tighter curves, I also used pliers. I made a shape that wrapped around the thick foam piece at the top of each wing, and I continued the wire down the back. Definitely double up on the wire down the back, or if you have enough of it, even triple it. I used some tape to secure the wire pieces of foam that will be hidden. Here's what it looks like with it all taped together. Next, to add more detail and also cover the wire and the foam at the top, I use some fake fur and hot glue it to the top of the wing. As I glue it, I cut off any excess fur. I also cut some lines in the top so it's able to wrap around my back. Then I flip the wing over and glue it to the back as well. As you can see, I did use a bit of hot glue to try to hold the wire in place. I mostly applied the glue over the wire because it will not stick to the wire. If there isn't enough fur to cover a section, just glue on a little patch of fur to fill it in. When the fur is all glued on and trimmed, I glue onto it little foam feathers scattered throughout. This helps blend the foam with the fur. Next, I make these little horns that are at the top of her wings. I make a little pattern and cut out 4 pieces from a foam mat. I glue the backs together, trim down the edges, then sand down the edges to smooth and curve them. I go over the horn with a heat gun to seal it. then I glue it onto the wing. I left a hole in the fur so I can glue it down. I also glued down the fur around the edges to make sure it's secure. If you want, you can paint it before you glue it on, but I just painted it afterward. I also glue the fur down on the back of the wire to hide it. Next, I cut some thick strips of foam and glue them to the wire that will press against my back. This adds padding. I use yarn and tightly wrap it around the foam strip to secure it. Then I take pieces of felt and glue them around the yarn to keep it secure and add even more padding. Next, I use basic acrylic paints to paint all the feathers. I started with a solid coat of dark brown. Then I went down the center of every feather with a lighter brown. I also went back in to add some shadows with black paint, but I don't have footage of that. But you can paint the wings however you want. There are so many different kinds of wings in the second movie, so you can be creative. Here are the wings on after they're done being painted. I'm using a corset that I found on Amazon to hold them up against my body. I will add a link to this corset in the description. This isn't about reshaping your body, it's about having something strong enough to hold up the wings. You may also be able to use a firm lifter's belt or harness if you want. You can try different things and figure out what works best for you. There's no right or wrong way to do it. I suggest the bigger the wings, the longer the wire goes down your back to balance the weight. As you can see, the wire from this presses all the way down to my bottom for extra support. That's so all the weight doesn't press in the center of my back. And all of it will get hidden by her outfits anyway, so it doesn't matter. And that's pretty much it. I really hope you found this tutorial helpful. I remember that I was very intimidated and overwhelmed when starting these wings. But as I worked on them, I've realized they were actually pretty easy to make. So I hope this tutorial can help them be less intimidating for you too. I will be adding helpful links in the description, so be sure to check that out. I also have a Maleficent makeup tutorial on my channel, as well as many other cosplay tutorials that you can watch. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Bye!